Living in the house her mother left behind is a 26-year-old lady. This is a nice, intimate space bursting with memories. After her death 2 years ago, this house became my haven. My mother and I were quite close. It's a piece of my mom's legacy, not only a house. She left it in her will, and ever since then, I have been living here alone. I feel independent when I handle the upkeep and pay the expenses. That helps me. My dad began seeing a woman he met online called Elena around a year ago. I was first glad for him. After losing Mom, my dad was lonely, and I saw this as his opportunity at happiness once more. Still, things changed rapidly. 3 months of dating later, Elena moved in with him. At first I gave it little thought since I had no right meddling in his relationship. I only wanted his happiness. Elena started displaying her actual hues not long ago. She was too involved right away, offering advice on how my dad may improve his life. It began with little things like his wardrobe or interests, but soon she was looking at my house. Elena started hinting about remodeling, remarking in passing how the living room may benefit from a different sofa or color choice. At first, I gently turned aside her remarks, but it soon got more intense. She dropped over one day with fabric swatches for fresh drapes and paint samples. I was surprised. I hadn't asked for her viewpoint and most definitely wasn't going to change anything. Reminding her that this was my house, I attempted to be polite, but preferred it how it was. Saying she was only trying to help, Elena laughed it off, but it seemed intrusive, as if she was attempting to claim my area as her own. Part 2. Rising tensions and an unbelievable discovery. Arguments began not long after that. It was constantly about little things. The location of the coffee table, the ancient chair in the corner, and renovating the kitchen. Every time I pushed back, she seemed startled as though she couldn't believe I didn't value her input. And every time, my dad sided with her, shrugged it off, and said Elena simply wanted what was best for us. It enraged me. Things got strange when Elena began presenting herself to my neighbors as the lady of the house. One of them mentioned it casually, thinking I knew. I stumbled. Elena chuckled when I challenged her about it and said it was only a figure of speech. She seemed, however, to be attempting to claim ownership of something that wasn't hers. The breaking point arrived when I discovered her prowling in my room. One day, I arrived home early from work and discovered Elena in my bedroom sorting through my dresser drawers. I didn't buy it for a second. She appeared shocked and instantly adopted her innocent front, saying she was just trying to help me organize. She had no right to be in my room, I gently reminded her. As cool as I could, she pouted, behaving like I would have, but I didn't give a damn. I started to rage. Later, when I informed my dad about it, he simply dismissed it, saying Elena was attempting to make the house feel more like a home for all of us. He seemed unable to notice what was directly in front of him. Elena was crossing limits, and he was letting her go unpacked. Then arrived the day I discovered the antique piano of my mother moved in the garage. Among the few items I had left of hers, the piano was one. I kept it in the living room for a reminder. When I got home, it was gone, dumped into the garage and covered with a tarp. Saying it didn't suit her intended new look for the living area, Elena behaved as if it was no great thing, reminding her that this was my house and she had no say in such issues. I snapped. That resulted in a major quarrel as Elena asserted that the house belonged to her and my dad since they were together. What I was hearing defied belief. I told her, rather precisely, that I paid property taxes and expenses. The house was legally mine. My dad merely stood there perplexed, as though he really thought the house belonged to every one of us. Things got more heated when Elena advised I should move out. I was taken aback when she remarked, it would be better for everyone if I let them have room to be a real family. Having just spent a year in our life, she was already trying to drive me from my own house. It dawned on me then that I had to rapidly establish some limits. Although I had a nagging sense this was only the beginning, I had no idea Elena's extent of willingness. The eviction and the fallout. Part 3. I knew I had to act following the disaster with lock changing. Elena was treating my house as if it belonged to her, not only oversteering. To find out my rights and plan my future, I spoke with a lawyer. The attorney was clear. Elena had no legal claim to remain since she hadn't paid rent, wasn't on the deed, and made no financial contribution. He told me to bring her an eviction notice. It felt extreme, but following all she had done, it was the only way I could get my house under control. I arrived home from work, carrying the eviction notice the next day. As I entered the living room, I heard laughing. Sitting on the couch, Elena and my dad were watching TV, as everything seemed normal. Holding the eviction notice out, I cut them off. Elena's smile vanished right away, and my dad glanced up perplexed. With composure, I clarified that Elena had 30 days to leave. This was an official eviction notice. Elena responded with tremendous power. Rising from the couch, she screamed, "I am heartless, and I am trying to ruin their relationship." She began to wail, calling every name in the book, as my dad sat there stunned. When he got up at last to try to cool Elena, she was having a full-fledged breakdown. She persisted in saying I was envious and couldn't stand to watch my dad content. With his expression begging, my dad turned to me and asked if I truly wanted to go forward with this. Serving an eviction notice would destroy everything, he argued, including his relationship with Elena. I remained steadfast, though. She had no right to be here following what she had done. This was my house. Elena then drew out her persuasion playbook. Saying I had told her she could live here, she started gaslighting me right in front of Dad. She stated we would all be a large, happy family, and that she could assist the house to feel like a home once more. Looking even more perplexed, as though he was actually thinking about her comments, was my dad? Then it dawned on me, Elena had been feeding him lies, giving him false belief she owned the house. The quarrel got hot right away, and soon my aunt, the sister of my mother, called me. Word traveled quickly, though I'm not sure how. She was enraged, not with me, but with my dad, for letting this spiral get so out of control. My aunt has always been my rock. She told me right away to be strong and not let Elena control the circumstances. Elena still had work to do. She changed direction once more after her breakdown, threatening legal action, claiming tenant rights. She will contest the eviction before court. As she issued these threats, I could see the terror in my dad's eyes. He seemed desperate, as though he no longer knew who to believe. He pleaded with me to come to some sort of arrangement so we might all live peacefully. Seeing him so defeated broke my heart, but I knew I couldn't stop. Fourth, courtroom drama and a family torn apart. Arriving at the court hearing, I was a ball of anxiety. Elena was seated there grinning smugly as I entered the courtroom, expecting her to be nervous or at least uncomfortable. To surprise me even, she had a lawyer with her. Her assurance made me question what type of falsehoods she intended to pass. The hearing itself passed as a haze. Elena and her attorney maintained she was a legal renter. She had been helping out around the house, and I was evicting her out of spite. I showed my proof. Elena's lack of any financial contribution, the property taxes, the energy bills. Her attorney contended that she was only a guest who had overstayed her invitation. Fortunately, the court could see Elena's lies through. He decided in my favor, allowing the eviction. Though Elena was enraged, she had no idea what to do. She has 30 days to leave my residence. Though I believed it would mark the end of it, I was mistaken. Elena did not go silently. She kept underlining my dad's manipulation against me. He began to see her interpretation of events, that I was the one driving all the issues. He charged me with being egotistical and of not giving his happiness any thought. I felt the most alone at this period. This woman was chosen by my own father, above his own daughter. How he missed what she was doing eluded me. My dad moved out finally, deciding to live with Elena. That was a really terrible blow. I thought I had lost him totally. Without him, the home seemed vacant. Still, there was calm at the same moment. At last, I could inhale once more. I could make choices free from continual second-guessing by others. I could remodel, at last making the place really my own. Though it has been a challenging road, I am beginning to heal. I'm concentrating on my friends, on my job, on me. Living without my dad in my life is not simple and is something I am learning. Still, I know I will be okay. My inheritance and haven is this house, and I won't allow someone to deprive me of that. It involved more than just redoing the furniture. Like what Elena began doing, introducing herself to my neighbors as the lady of the house, Mrs. Girdling, an elderly sweetheart who constantly brings over zucchini bread, mentioned it to me in passing among the neighbors. With all grins, "Oh, your dad's new wife seems nice," she had added. I roughly choked on my coffee. Couple. Elena laughed it off when I asked her about it, claiming it was only a way of stating she lived there, but it felt strange, as though she were marking her territory, you know? Then arrived the day I left early from my job. I got a migraine, the sort that causes stars to show up. I simply wanted to curl up into bed and bury my head. But Elena was rummaging through my drawers as I entered my bedroom. She plastered this false smile after jumping like a scared deer. "Just trying to help you tidy up, sweetie," she chirped. "Keep neat?" My blood ran cold. She was invading my own haven, which was this. She flounced off, behaving all wounded, when I told her to leave. I later went to try to discuss it with my dad. "Dad?" I exclaimed. "Elena was going through my things." He merely sighed and remarked, "Oh, honey, she's just trying to make this place feel like home for all of us." House. That word began to taste to me like ashes. Elena was turning my house, which Mom left behind, into one that seemed to belong to her as well. Next comes the piano of my mother. Though somewhat out of tune, it was old and carried a lot of memories. Mom played Chopin on rainy evenings. I used to stumble over scales while a child. It was a link to her, not only a tool. I kept it in the living room, where the worn-out wood would be caught by sunshine. One day, it vanished, faded. It was shoved in the garage behind a dirty tarp cover. Elena said it didn't go with the new decor when I confronted her. Decor? This was my life, not some piece of furniture for showrooms. We got into a very nasty argument. She remarked, rather truthfully, that the house was really hers, because she and my dad were together. That helped me to realize this had nothing to do with throw pillows or paint colors now. Elena aimed to rule my house, my life, my memories. The worst of all is also my dad was letting her. He was so engrossed in this new romance that he missed what was happening right under his eyes. Something had to change. I also understood that I had to start it. This whole incident with Elena was not only some argument over throw pillows anymore. I was caught in the deluge as if a storm cloud had dropped over my house. Though I understood I had to act, always poised for the next eruption, I felt as though I was treading on eggshells. One day, it dawned on me that I had to speak with someone who knew this stuff, someone who could explain my rights. I took an unusual action. I phoned a lawyer. Mr. Thompson was a straight-shooting attorney. I told him everything, even the remodeling, the spying, the garage piano, and the 9 yards. He looked at me when I was finished and said, "Miss, this woman has no legal right to be in your house. She's not on the deed. She's basically a guest. You can evict her. Send her off?" The word weighty, like a stone in my hand. Still, the more I considered it, the more natural it seemed. This was both my mother's and my house. Some stranger pushing me out of it wasn't something I was going to let happen. I thus proceeded. I carried the completely official, stamped eviction papers I received home. In the living room, Elena and my dad were laughing over something on TV. Papers in hand, I entered, and the laughing died in their throats. "Elena," I continued, a tiny tremor in my voice, "this is an eviction notice. You have 30 days to leave." Well, you ought to have seen her face. It got white, then crimson, then this sort of purplish hue I had never seen on a human before. She began screaming and crying about how merciless I was, about how I was attempting to sour her relationship with my dad. Just sitting there, my dad seemed to be a deer caught in headlights. "This is my house," I responded, attempting to keep a calm voice. "Your right to be here is non-existent." Elena started with the lies at that point. She stated we would be one great happy family, and she could live there permanently. She even began to cry, stating I was envious of my dad and her. Bless his heart. My dad seemed rather perplexed, starting to implore me to change her mind. He said this would sour his relationship with Elena. Still, I stayed put. This concerned my house rather than his relationship. Then all of a sudden my aunt called. Like a second mother to me, Aunt Susan, my mother's sister, had heard about what was happening, but was not having it. "Don't you back down," she urged. "That woman is simply a grass snake." Hearing her say that gave me strength. I was not unique in this. I had supporters and individuals that loved me. Elena, though, was not giving up. Declaring she had tenant rights, she began threatening to sue me. Dad appeared frightened. He persisted in asking me to come to some kind of arrangement so she may stay. Still, I couldn't. I had to mark a beach line. This was my residence. I also intended to fight for it. That courtroom was a chilly, commanding space. Echoes reverberated off the tall ceilings, and the air felt charged. Elena sat there, all prim and nice, as though she were at a tea party rather than confronting homelessness. She even had an expensive attorney at her side whispering in her ear. Her like that, so assured, made my tummy turn around. What kind of lies would she have spun today? But something changed inside me when it came time to speak. I stood erect, pointed the judge straight in the eye, and related my experience. I mentioned my mother, about this house being her legacy, about how Elena had bargained in and sought to erase everything. Every phrase seemed to be strengthening my voice. Elena's attorney tried to present me as some spoiled brat, envious of my dad's new happiness. However, I had evidence. I showed them the bills, the bank records, the property taxes, all paid by me, not 1 cent from Elena. He was an intelligent elderly man with eyes that appeared to look right through you. He listened calmly, then slammed his gavel to declare, "The eviction is granted." Relief came over me, so powerful it nearly caused vertigo. I could have won. Elena was obliged to go. Still, the struggle was not finished. Not quite yet. She was, Elena, like a weed. You remove it, yet the roots remain buried deep, just waiting to resprout. Whispering poison in my dad's ear, she told him I was the terrible man, trying to run his life, and the worst aspect is also, he began to come to believe her. He pleaded with me to simply let them live in the house and drop the whole matter. I was severing the family, he claimed. But how would I? This now concerned my own sanity, my own life, not only about a house. One day then, my dad arrived with his suitcase packed. He was about to depart, entering with Elena. He stated it was only temporary. I knew better. She would have been his choice. The damage was like a physical blow. My own father, supporting a woman who had tried to pilfer my house. I couldn't make sense of it. The house felt so vacant after he departed. But you know, though, it also seemed lighter, like I could at last start breathing. I began making little modifications initially. Getting rid of the ugly vase Elena had brought in, I painted the living room the color I wanted. It felt fantastic, recovering my territory. The whispers followed then. Elena began disseminating tales about me, claiming I was insane and that I had kicked my impoverished elderly father onto the street. A few family members even began to treat me with the cold shoulder. It felt as though I was engaged in a two-front struggle against Elena and against my own family. But I had Aunt with me. Aunt Susan never changed her mind. She stood beside me and informed everyone who would listen that Elena was lying. Then gradually, things began to change. People could see through Elena's performance. They watched her controlling my dad and separating him from everyone else who loved him. Though it took time, my dad came around at last. He saw Elena for the genuine her. It was not simple. Tears, apologies, and many difficult talks were involved. But we began piecemeal rebuilding our friendship. Elena, well, she's left. For good. Out of our lifetime. She traveled to another town in search of her next victim, I heard. Still, I'm not worried. I am stronger today. I am worthy, and I am aware that this house, this home, is mine. That is a mixed triumph. Along the road, I lost faith, innocence, perhaps even a bit of my dad. I did, however, also acquire something. I got my voice. I picked up the ability to defend myself and fight for what's right. And that, I shall always carry with me. Story 2. Honestly, I never imagined I would be typing this. My head is a jumble. I could definitely use some viewpoint. Thus, the bargain is that I am adopted, consistently have been. From the beginning, my parents, Liam and Clara, were straightforward about it. They told me how I came to them, a small infant, just a few months old, when they were unable to have children of their own. They never covered the truth that I had a biological mother, but it wasn't something we focused on, though I believe they wanted to be my family, and I never felt like I was missing anything. As I grew older, it was not taboo to inquire. She was like, "What?" She gave me up for what reason? Has she given me any thought at all? Though these ideas would come to me sometimes, I was mainly at peace. My life was decent. I belonged to a wonderful family. Until now, I didn't feel the need to go into the past. I'm 35 now, married to Ethan, a fantastic man, and we have 2 kids, Leo, 6, and Maya, 4. Our family felt whole to me always. Though I never felt the need to investigate, I would periodically wonder about my biological mother. I believed I had everything I could ever need. A few weeks ago, I received a message that really threw me. It came from a woman called Beatrice, my real mother. She wants to connect after 35 years of quiet. I cannot even put the whirl of feelings into words. Certainly shocked. Definitely confusion. Still, there's also rage. After all this time, how could she simply waltz back? Why then? Her preferences are what? I had already forgiven never knowing her. I did not ask for this. Though they were merely dreams, I occasionally fantasized of meeting her. I was not sure I even wanted it to happen, and I never expected it to. My life was fulfilled without her. Opening the door seemed dangerous, particularly with her children involved. Beatrice's message was long. She stated she had considered me every single day. Not a second passed when she questioned if I was pleased, whether I was loved, whether I was wondering about her. She said she thought she lacked the money and assistance to raise a child, and she was just 20 when she had me. That part was heartbreaking. Giving me up was the toughest choice she ever made, but she did it so I would live better. I cannot imagine how difficult that must have been. Though I am sympathetic, I am also conflicted. She left me. She wasn't part of my life, but I understand she had motives. She missed my graduations, first words, birthdays, and first walks. When I needed a teenage shoulder to cry on or guidance, she was there. My parents were. She also wants back in after all these years. It doesn't sit right. What truly threw me was her mentioning of my children. She said she would want to get to know her son and daughter, so she could be in their lives. She knows they have the rage truly strikes at that point. Given she wasn't even in my life, how can she expect to meet my children? The choice to see Beatrice wasn't simple. It seems presumptuous, as if she's attempting to make up lost time in a way that just isn't feasible. I battled questions I wasn't sure I wanted answers to late into sleepless nights. Could she clarify her reason for giving up? Is the truth something I could manage? I was not only the lady Sarah gave up on anymore. I belonged to the mother category. That brought about a transformation of everything. The anxiousness before the meeting was unreal. It was for my kids as well, not only for me. Opening this door would help them. I kept playing through several possibilities. Would she be remote and frigid? Would she call for pardon and cry? Living with the questions was second nature to me. Now, answers were just hours away, and I wasn't sure I was ready. Though there was conflict, a part of me was motivated by a strong need for closure. The day arrived, and I selected a cafe with no particular leaning. It seemed less intimate, safer, as though it might protect me from the weight of what was about to happen. My heart hammering, I arrived first. She then started to walk in. Her appearance immediately caught me as unremarkable. She lacked the greater-than-life aura I had developed. Like every other woman you would pass on the street, Beatrice appeared normal. Her face was wrinkled, her hair streaked with gray, and she seemed weary. She saw me, and our eyes locked. She strolled across, and the tension was heavy. She seemed anxious. Her fidgeting with her purse told me this. She sat down at last, and there was a stifling hush. How on earth would one begin a conversation like this? "Hi," she uttered gently, her voice quivering. I nodded, not sure what to say. "It's so good to see you." It seemed weird. Face to face with the lady who gave me life, she felt like a stranger. Beatrice started her story fast, as if she had to get it out. She spoke with me about her early years, her alone and unprepared attitude toward being a mother. The toughest thing Mom had done was give me up. She had daily thoughts about me, worrying about my life. I was wary even though I listened. Though I just felt numb, I wanted to trust her and experience some connection. I had built up this moment all my life, but hearing her speak didn't provide the clarity or respite I had hoped. Then came the bombshell. I questioned if she was speaking the truth or just what she thought I would want to hear. "I tracked your life," Beatrice said. The oxygen seemed sucked out of the room. "I know you have children now. I was hoping maybe I could be a part of their life, not this." Although I had ready for a discussion on her leaving, she wanted to be engaged with my kids, my family. She was not only seeking a relationship with me. I felt violated, knowing facts about my life without me knowing anything about her. She had been monitoring me. She now wanted to meet my kids. I kicked in with my protective side. She should not approach them closely, not even knowing her. With something so vital, how could I trust her? Seeing my hesitancy made Beatrice more worried, saying she just wanted to make up lost time and that she wanted to be a grandma in a way she never got to be a mother. She tried to explain. Her comments, meanwhile, seemed frantic and nervous. It felt like she was attempting to fill a gap. It wasn't only about getting back in touch with me. When the conference finished, I felt more perplexed than ever. I left with more questions, while going in expecting answers and closure. I couldn't get rid of the idea that Beatrice's abrupt need to reconnect had additional meaning. I went back over the chat on the way home. Was her sincerity evident? Alternatively, was something else driving her? Why would she have such a great want to meet my children? Was she seeking atonement or guilt? Regret? Ethan questioned how it went as he observed I was off. I said everything to him. He listened quietly, but he was wary when I was done. "It sounds like she's trying to make up lost time, but I don't like that she wants to meet the kids so soon. You don't even know her yet." I spoke with Liam and Clara too. His comments reflected my own. They were protective as well as damaged. "She didn't raise you, Sarah. We did. Now she wants to swoop in and play grandma. I'm not sure that's fair to any of us," Liam said, stinging, but I understood. After talking to everyone, I felt emotionally spent. I understood I had to decide. I revised my Reddit post to spell everything out exactly. People pushed me to set limits and to go gently. Others cautioned me on letting Beatrice back in at all. One particularly noteworthy comment was, "Family isn't just about biology. It's about who's been there for you, who's loved you, and who's earned a place in your life. You get to decide who that is." I set a second meeting with Beatrice. I had questions and sought responses. She seemed more coordinated this time, as though she had something to prove. She discussed her life following my death, how she had had 2 sons, now grown, but they were not close. Her voice was regretful, but also something else. She seemed to be attempting to shame me. She remarked, "They don't visit much anymore," her voice lower. "I live alone now, thinking about all the mistakes I made. Reconnecting with you, it feels like a second chance. And the decision to actually meet Beatrice, man, that was tough. It wasn't a quick thing. I spent so many nights just lying there, staring at the ceiling, my mind a runaway train. Questions kept popping up, questions I wasn't even sure I wanted answers to. Could she really explain why she gave me up? And if she did, could I even handle it? It wasn't just about me anymore either. I wasn't just Sarah, the kid she gave up. I was a mom now. That changes everything, doesn't it? If I was going to open this door, it wasn't just for me. It was for Leo and Maya too. The closer I got to the day, the worse the anxiety got. It was like this constant hum in the back of my head. I kept running through different scenarios. Would she be cold, distant? Would she break down and beg for forgiveness? I'd lived with the questions for so long, they'd become almost comfortable in a weird way. Now the answers were just hours away, and honestly, I wasn't sure I was ready for them. But despite all the nerves, this deep down part of me, it needed closure. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. Finally, the day arrived. I picked a cafe, a quiet one, nothing too fancy, somewhere neutral. It felt safer, I guess, less personal, like it would somehow protect me from the full weight of what was about to happen. I got there early, of course. My heart was pounding like a drum. I kept looking at the door, waiting for her to walk in. I've been nervous before, with big life moments and all, but this was different. This felt deeper, like it could change everything. Then she came in. The first thing that struck me was how normal she looked. I'd built her up in my head, this almost mythical figure, but she was just a woman. Beatrice looked like anyone you'd pass on the street and not think twice about. She had lines on her face, her hair was going gray, and there was this kind of weariness about her, like life had taken its toll. I don't know what I was expecting exactly, but it wasn't this ordinary. She saw me right away. Our eyes met across the cafe, and the air just crackled with tension. You could feel it. As she walked towards me, I noticed how nervous she was too, the way she kept fiddling with her purse, the hesitant steps she took. When she finally sat down, there was this awkward silence, you know? Like, where do you even begin with a conversation like this? "Hi," she said, her voice soft, a little shaky. It's so good to see you." I just nodded. I didn't know what to say back. It felt so strange, so unreal. Here I was, sitting across from the woman who gave me life, and she felt like a complete stranger. Beatrice started talking pretty quickly, almost like she needed to get it all out before she lost her nerve. She told me about when she was young, how alone she felt, how completely unprepared she was to be a mom. She said that giving me up, that was the hardest thing she'd ever done. She'd thought about me every day, wondering where I was, what kind of life I had. I listened to her, but I kept my guard up. I wanted to believe her. I really did. I wanted to feel some kind of connection, but I just felt numb. It was like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. I'd imagined this moment so many times, but hearing her talk didn't bring the sense of understanding or relief I thought it would. Instead, I found myself wondering if she was telling the whole truth, or if she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. And then she dropped the bomb. I've followed your life," she said. "I know you have children now. I was hoping maybe I could be a part of their lives." It was like someone punched me in the gut. I'd been ready for a conversation about the past, about why she made the choice she did, but I hadn't even considered this. She wasn't just asking for a relationship with me. She wanted to be involved with my kids, with my family. I just sat there, stunned. Part of me felt violated, almost. She'd been watching me, knowing things about my life, and I didn't know anything about her. And now she wanted to meet my kids? That protective mama bear inside me just roared to life. I couldn't let her get close to them. I didn't even know her. How could I possibly trust her with something so precious? I could see Beatrice's nervousness getting worse as she saw my reaction. She tried to explain herself, saying she just wanted to make up for lost time, that she wanted to be a grandmother to my kids, the way she never got to be a mother to me. But her words, they just didn't feel right. There was this desperation in her voice, and it made me uneasy. It wasn't about reconnecting with me. It felt like feel some space inside herself. Sure, I wanted to be the one to do it. The second I got home after meeting Beatrice, I knew I had to talk to Clara to couldn't just keep all those thoughts swirling around. It was too much to carry alone. Liam and Clara had always been there for me, always made me feel like I was their daughter, no question. But I couldn't ignore the fact that Beatrice showing up like this was going to shake things up. I wasn't prepared for just how much, though. I called Clara first. As soon as she picked up, I could hear the warmth in her voice, like she'd been waiting for my call. "Hey, sweetie, how did it go?" Her tone was light, but I could tell she was worried too. This whole thing had been hanging over us. "It's complicated," I said, which was a massive understatement. I just dove right in and told her everything about Beatrice's explanations, how she said giving me up was the hardest thing she'd ever done, and then, of course, the big one, wanting to meet the kids. When I finished, there was this silence on the other end of the line. "Mom?" I asked, suddenly worried I'd upset her. She finally spoke, but her voice sounded strained. "Oh, Sarah, this is a lot to take in." I could tell she was hurt, not by anything I'd done, but by Beatrice just reappearing like this, throwing our whole family dynamic into question. Mom had been there for every scraped knee, every bedtime story. The thought of Beatrice stepping in now, after all these years, it must have felt like an invasion. Do you think she's being sincere?" she asked. "I don't know," I admitted. I want to believe her, but the way she immediately asked to meet the kids, it just felt off. Mom sighed. I could almost see the tension in her face, even over the phone. "Sarah, I don't want to tell you what to do, but you need to be careful. She could hurt you again, and I don't want to see that happen. Not to you, and certainly not to your children." That hit hard. Mom was right. I did have to protect myself, but more than that, I had to protect Leo and Maya. Still, this little part of me felt conflicted. What if Beatrice was sincere? What if she genuinely changed and wanted to make amends? After talking to Mom, I called Liam. His reaction was similar, but a little more direct. "She didn't get to raise you, Sarah. We did, and now she wants to swoop in and play grandma. I'm not sure that's fair to any of us." It stung to hear him say that, but I understood where he was coming from. My parents had poured everything into raising me, giving me a life full of love and support. The idea of Beatrice trying to just slide into that role now felt like an intrusion. But then again, wasn't this exactly what I'd always wondered about? Why did she give me up? And now that I had answers, was it fair to just shut her out completely? By the time I talked to Ethan, I was emotionally exhausted. He listened carefully, as always, taking in every detail without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "I get why you're conflicted," he said. "But we need to think about the kids first. If there's even a small chance this could mess with them, we have to be careful." I knew he was right. Ethan was always the calm, rational one in our relationship. His steady presence kept me grounded. "So, what do you think we should do?" I asked, desperate for his perspective. "I'm not saying no outright," he said carefully, "but if we even consider letting Beatrice into our lives, it has to be on our terms, slowly, cautiously, and if you're uncomfortable with it at any point, we stop." His response was more neutral than my parents', but still cautious. He wasn't dismissing Beatrice completely, but he was wary. I appreciated that he wasn't pushing me to make a decision right away. He was giving me space to process everything, which was exactly what I needed. The tension between my adoptive family and the situation with Beatrice was already building. I hadn't even made any decisions yet, but just the fact that she wanted to reconnect felt like a bomb about to go off. My parents were hurt and protective. Ethan was cautious but open, and I was stuck in the middle, trying to figure out what the right thing to do was. I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter what I decided, someone was going to get hurt. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, staring at my phone. My mind was spinning. Was I being selfish to even consider letting Beatrice into my life after everything my adoptive parents had done for me? Or was I being selfish to deny Beatrice the chance to be part of my life now that she'd reached out? I needed clarity. I needed advice from people who'd been through something like this. So, I turned to Reddit again, updating the community that had been following my story. I posted the update and waited. Some people encouraged me to take things slow, to set boundaries, to protect my children first. Others warned me about letting Beatrice back in at all, telling their own stories about birth parents who reappeared only to bring more chaos and pain. As I read through the comments, I realized there wasn't going to be an easy answer. No one could make this decision for me, but knowing that others had been through similar struggles, it helped. I wasn't alone in this. The comments made me think about how complicated family dynamics can be, especially when adoption is involved. Biological parents, the families who raised us, it's a tangled web. I didn't want to hurt my adoptive parents. I didn't want to put my children in a difficult position, but I also didn't want to shut Beatrice out without giving her a chance, even if it was a small one. Then I saw a comment that really stuck with me. Family isn't just about biology, it's about who's been there for you, who's loved you, and who's earned a place in your life. You get to decide who that is. I read that line over and over, letting it sink in. It was true. At the end of the day, I had to choose who I wanted in my life and in my children's lives, and that choice wasn't just about Beatrice. It was about what was best for my family, the family I had built, the people who had been there for me through everything. The weight of the decision still felt heavy, but for the first time, I started to feel like maybe I had more control over this than I thought.